What's going on?
All right, what's up, dude?
All right, gotta turn this off. All right, so you've successfully triggered me enough in your support of the abortion holocaust, so here I am.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's do it. I'll take on her same position. So my view is that I value sentience for all beings that have at one point reached sentience. The potential for sentience for all beings that have at one point reached sentience. This is why I do not think most cases of abortions are ethical. This is also or should be legal. This is also why I don't. My view doesn't lead me into sperm rights reductios, egg rights reductios, or killing people while they're in comas. I do think there's a difference between. I do think my ethical, at least ethically, I think there's a difference. Legally, there should be a difference between the case of rape and the case of non-rape. We could go into the symmetry breakers for that. There may or may not be a difference ethically. Well, there probably is, but I still think it probably would be unethical. So what I think you would want is a symmetry breaker for the rape case and the non-rape case. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. And when you say potential for sentience, so
Mm-hmm.
if a fetus hasn't, okay, so wait, for potential sentience, it would have to have already had sentience?
No, no. So here's what I value. I value the potential for sentience for all beings that have at one point reached sentience in the past. So,
Okay,
for
so that's
example,
why
yeah,
a coma
yeah,
victim,
yeah.
okay, so if it's just a fetus that hasn't reached
Mhm.
sentience yet, not a big deal. Okay.
Correct,
All right,
correct.
cool.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So the symmetry breakers that overdetermine. So I'm not saying these are exactly the symmetry breakers and if one is missing, then it wouldn't be a sufficient symmetry breaker to make a difference in the attitude towards the belief. However, these overdetermine it. In other words, if these symmetry breakers are in place, then it would be a difference such that you would say, okay, uh, my view of how moral or legal this is should be different, really legal. So the symmetry breakers that overdetermine the responsibility condition is what I call it. So obvious difference in the rape versus non-rape cases. In the non-rape case, on my view, there's a responsibility condition to the fetus. Why is there a responsibility condition to the fetus? On my view, is there's a conjunction of the following four things. Number one, so it's a conjunction. It
Let
has
me
to be
actually write
inclusive.
this
Yeah,
down.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can actually send it to you.
Um, yeah, I guess you could.
Yeah, here you go.
Are you gonna send it to me just through
Yep.
Discord or?
Oh, this is I don't know why the text is
Yeah, it's all black and weird.
really, yeah, I don't know why I did that. I did it in a Microsoft
Um,
Word page document. But
are
yeah,
you on your phone or laptop?
I'm on a laptop. I'll just do
Okay.
it. Yeah, I'll just do it here. There we go. Okay. I'll edit that to make it look pretty. Four things. Number one, number two, three, four. Okay. So the symmetry breakers that overdetermine the responsibility condition are the following four things. It's a conjunction of the four things. It's not any one of them alone, but the overdetermination is for the following four things. Number one, the individual partook in forcing another being to be in a state of dependence upon that individual in the first place. Number two, the being is sentient or currently sentient. Number three, the dependency has already been instantiated. So it's not a question, for example, of you knocked someone over with a car and that you need their kidney. Do they need your kidney or they need to be hooked up to you? Do they have the right to hook themselves up to you? This is actually in a case where it's already taken place, where the hooking up is already there. Does it matter if that's not there? I don't know. This is just there to overdetermine it because that's just the case in the abortion case. Number four, knowledge of the current probability of forcing another being to be dependent on you. So if all four of those things are there, it overdetermines the symmetry breaker.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let's see. Okay. So I'll just do. So you know the Judith Jarvis Thompson
Mhm.
violinist thing. Okay,
Yep.
so let's just change that hypothetical where instead of waking up next to the person attached,
Mhm.
let's say you know the person, you care about them, you
Yep.
willingly attached yourself to them, And then one day you
Well, I
decided,
have to stop you there. Yeah, it's
okay,
not that you willingly attach yourself to them. It's you partook in forcing them to be in a state of dependency on you. So, for example, let's say there was a poison, right? So let's say I inject you with a poison for fun, and there was a certain probability that that poison would cause you to be in a state of dependence on me, that you would need to be hooked up to me for a given amount of time.
sure.
Knowing this, I decide to have the fun anyway, and I start injecting you with the poison, and lo and behold, that's instantiated. I wake up, and it turns out, what for whatever reason, I engaged in this activity where I injected you with this poison, and you turns out that you just happened to be dependent on me, and I knew the risk, and I took it, and I injected you, and I forced you to be in a state of dependency on me. Now the question is,
Okay.
yeah. So the question is, now that I forced you to be in a state of dependency
Wait,
on
wait,
me,
wait.
can
Okay,
I?
wait. Run through that again.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
So you poison someone just for
Mm-hmm.
fun,
Mm-hmm.
and because you poison them,
Yeah.
they need your kidney, and then you
Well,
attach
not
them
kidney.
to.
Let's. Yeah,
It
we'll
doesn't
say
matter. Like,
not
yeah,
to. Yeah, it doesn't have to be poison. Doesn't have to be kidney. Whatever reason, you're attached for 9 months.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the
Sure.
point is, the key point here is that you were the ones that forced this individual to be dependent on you in the first place.
Okay,
That's
so
the key.
it's the
Yeah.
forcing issue that
Yeah.
you have a problem
You.
with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the symmetry breakers. Yeah.
Okay. Hmm. That's a tough one. All right. Yeah.
Abortion Holocaust always is, Richard.
Yeah. All right. Let me think of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Okay, and all right. I think the way I'm gonna have to go here is, I guess, bring up the rape example.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said that in a legal context, women
Mm-hmm.
should be allowed to get an abortion due to rape. What about in a moral context?
So in a moral context isn't what we, well, it's what we morally aren't allowed to do. So I don't have a fully fleshed out view on that. My intuition is telling me that it probably would still be wrong. However, um, yeah, so I may not have a difference in view on that. It may not be enough to make a um, it may not be enough to over determine a symmetry breaker in a moral context. But I think my position is perfectly consistent in a legal context. Because, for example, um, if anyone were to say that, you know, I forced you to be in a position of dependency on me. Let's say I just did it to you. I just, decided to have fun and make you require to be hooked up to me. I wake up and you're hooked up to me. I knew that it would happen or I knew that it was a given probability if it happened to happen. I took the risk. The dependency is already instantiated and you are currently sentient. And now the question is, should it be legal for me to chop you up? Well, given that I was the one that forced you to be in this damn position anyway, at no consent of your own, probably not.
Well,
Yeah.
wait, that's a little different in a rape case. It would be somebody
Yeah.
forcing you to have someone else be dependent on you.
Yes. So you're not the one. The key is that in the rape case, you are not. It is not the case that you partook in forcing another being to be a state in dependence on you. It's not through your voluntary actions that you force someone to be dependent on you. Whereas in the non-rape case, that is the case. It is the case that
Sure.
you, through your voluntary actions, force someone else to be dependent on you. So, for example, let's say in the rape case, let's say someone took you and hooked you up to me, right? Let's say that I wake up and all of a sudden, I find out that someone else injected this poison into you, right? So someone else injected a poison into you for fun. They knew that there may be a chance that you would be hooked up to me, that need to be hooked up to me, and they just did it anyway. I was not the one that injected you for fun. This other individual was. And then lo and behold, I wake up and, hey, you're hooked up to me. Am I legally forced to maintain being hooked up to you now? And I think in that case, there's a big difference. There's a huge difference between that and if I was the one that actually forced you to be in a state of dependence where you would need to be hooked up to me. Huge difference. In
Right.
that case, there's a much greater responsibility I have to you. Clear symmetry breaker.
Okay, cool. So, like, you don't have a strong opinion either way in a moral context, but in a legal context, you think you should be allowed to murder the person who's hooked up to you, assuming you were forced into that position?
Yeah, so in the moral context, so I'd have to think about it more, but in the moral context, if I imagine myself waking up, um, I can imagine myself waking up and I'm hooked up to you, and the question is, do I kill you? Do I kill you? And would it be wrong, rather? Would it be wrong if I were to kill you if someone else made you dependent on me? Um, I would probably have to think more about that. Um, Regardless of what my view is, morally, I think the case for legality is a clear symmetry breaker. Um, Morally, it's still like part of me still it would seem to be wrong for me to do that morally. So I'd have to think about that more clearly. But I could take the view that either way, though, I could understand if someone were to bring the argument that it would still be a symmetry breaker morally. Someone can say, okay, well, it's not morally wrong in the case of rape because you're not the person who forced this other being to be dependent on you in the first place. Like, I would accept that. I would understand that. There's no inconsistency, whether
Right.
it's morally or legally.
Okay.
Like, I would totally understand that argument. So I think there's a clear case to be made that in the rape case versus the non-rape case, there is not a contradiction if you understand the symmetry breakers that can be put forth. This is actually the most common objection to Judith Germain Thompson's um, argument is the responsibility objection. She has some responses to it. She doesn't have responses to my version of the responsibility objection because I've seen hers and modified mine accordingly to capture what we
Sure.
care about.
Right.
Yeah. So and do you still think that there is an inconsistency on my view?
Um,
Mhm.
somewhat. Okay,
Okay.
so like I mean fundamentally speaking, you're like the reason you have an issue with abortion, whether there's like a responsibility aspect there or not,
Hmm.
it's because you're taking away like a sentient life that has a will to live potentially, that could experience well-being, that wants to live, right?
Well, that would be a pro tanto reason to not do it, but it wouldn't be it's not a pro toto reason necessarily. There are many cases where we think it's okay to take away the life of a sentient being that has a will to live or a potential will to live. There are many contexts where we find this moral. It all depends on what context you're talking about. For example, there are contexts for self-defense. I don't Even if they have a will to live, I don't care. I'll shoot him. If there's a justified war, I don't care. I'll shoot him. If there are many different areas where I would say, even if it is the case that there is another individual that has the will to live and is sentient, I would be okay with killing them. Just depends on the context. All I'm saying here is this is one of the contexts where you can make a reasonable argument that it is okay to kill them.
Right. Okay. Hmm. Goddamn cat. I'm just reading over the
Hmm.
yeah and thinking. Um, so what about issues in situations where, let's say, you had to make a decision under duress? So
What do you mean?
so like let's say I don't know, like in a relationship, you had to like you agreed to have a pregnancy with your spouse, but it was under duress. Like the person like threatened you with something,
Hmm.
in some sort of way, like maybe physically,
Hmm.
or threatened to cut you
Yeah.
off, put you on the street, something like that.
Yeah. So in
What
other
about
words, like, if you don't get pregnant with my baby, I'm just gonna beat the shit out of you or something like that, right? Is that what you're asking?
it could, well, it could even be like less kind of graphic. Like let's
Hmm.
say, okay, this person that you're with
Hmm.
has no family, no skills, can't really get a
Hmm.
job, and if like okay, if you don't get pregnant, they'll kick you out on the street and you'll be homeless. Like a
Okay.
situation
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So I'll point out one important thing. I'll try my best to answer that. So the first thing I'll point out is that even if I can't answer that, it doesn't mean that it would be an inconsistency on my view in the situation where the individual really full on partook in the forcing of another being in a state of dependency on you. I think your
Sure.
examples that you're giving are where we kind of scale that symmetry breaker down. Well, let's say it's because there could be a spectrum of how much you actually partook in forcing this other being to be dependent on you. You could have full on forced it to be dependent on you. You could have been full on not forced it to be dependent on you in the case of full on rape. And there could be middle gray grounds, middle gray areas where, okay, you weren't like raped with at the point of a gun or something, but you required shelter. It would have drastically made a big difference in your life if you didn't do this. All of these things that kind of lead us to some sort of middle ground. There's like a gray area. And to be honest, I haven't thought fully about it. I don't have a full thought out view in these gray areas. It's kind of like a Sorites paradox where, where does a puddle become a lake? I don't have the exact answer to how many drops of water it takes for a puddle to become a lake. I don't think I need to. It's okay. There's a gray area and there's ambiguity. But it's clear that in the majority of cases of abortions, we're not talking about that. We are talking about non-rape cases. And I can still, even if it wasn't, it wouldn't be an inconsistency for me to have a problem in the cases where there is full-on voluntary non-abortive status, because the symmetry breaker partook in forcing another being to be in a state of dependence on you is full-on and there.
Okay. Let's see. You know what? The only thing I can really think of right now that I'm going to go with is I don't really give a fuck about a 4 or 5 month old fetus.
Okay.
So, like, even if we concede that like a 4 or 5 month old fetus is sentient, I don't know if you wanted to go over some of the research on that.
Yeah, we can, but I'd let you.
Sure.
I want you to finish your point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Even if they're like, let's just say sentience occurs at any time. I don't give a fucking shit. It's just such a small, insignificant being that is living rent-free in my body, and through, I don't know, just normal sort of daily activities that, people enjoy and do. That being was created. It's like comparing like consensual sex to, I don't know, you poisoning someone. I don't know. I find it kind of... so that they develop dependency to you. I do see a distinction between
important.
That.
Yeah,
I know it. I know it's just to analogize. Like I know what you mean, but big difference there. Like I do see a big distinction between you just partaking in, I don't know, normal casual sex with people. It's just an activity that a lot of people do daily just for fun and enjoyment and to build a relationship. And okay, just out of, a baby happens.
Well, before we go there, like you can disagree with the symmetry breaker, and we can go into why I think it would be absurd to disagree with the symmetry breaker. But before we go there, I just want concession that my position is not inconsistent. So whether
it's
you
not
agree
inconsistent.
with it,
no, I agree, it's not inconsistent.
All right, so we agree that my position is not inconsistent. Okay, great. Now we can go into why the value of the fetus at its current sentience level. I don't think that just saying, well, I just don't care about that. I think that leads to reductios. We could go into that.
Okay, sure. It's it's sort of a two-parter. So, like, for one, you're engaging in an activity that like everybody fucking does just for enjoyment or to be close to their partner. We just have
I'm just writing down the symmetry breakers. Engaging in activity.
Yeah, like a normal casual activity that most people enjoy.
Okay.
If
injecting someone was a poison, it was in a culture engaging in an activity everyone enjoyed.
Well, right. I mean, I see a difference between injecting somebody with poisons that are dependent on you and
playing with stem cells, Richard. Playing.
Okay, sure.
You played around with stem cells, and you knew that if you played with stem cells, these were special stem cells, such that it would just form a being, and the being would be be forced to be dependent on you, and it would have something would happen where it would hook itself up to you, and you would have forced this being to be in a dependent state on you. And the being is sentient. You knew the risk. We don't have to poison the well with poison. It could be any action where you take another being and you force the being to be dependent on you.
Okay, sure. And secondly, I mean, just the level of sentience. I
Hmm.
think one of the papers that I don't know if I sent you anything, but one of the papers that I relied on in a previous debate
Hmm.
for fetal sentience,
Yep.
it talked about things like lack of electrical activity in the brain. There's like long punctuations of inactivity. Just
Yeah, but
we can
we
go
can
over
go
that.
into
I
that.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
we can
you're a
go into that. Yeah.
doctor, so
Yeah. We.
so yeah, I mean, the level of sentience as
Hmm.
well also factors into
Sure.
this. I just don't see it as a
Hmm.
huge moral issue for me to not inconvenience myself and burden myself with some stupid kid who's going to ruin my life,
Sure.
or be a burden to the world in
Hmm.
some way, or live and suffer and shit like that, you know?
Okay. 2 points. First thing, question: do you only care about the current level of sentience in terms of ascribing value to a given being? Do you only consider the current level of sentience of the given being, or do you consider the potential for sentience for beings that have reached a given point of sentience or reach sentience at some given point? Because there's a very difference. They formed very different conclusions. So when you say, well, the
So if I
level of
only
sentience
care
we have
about
from.
current sentience,
Mhm.
or if something can be extremely sentient in the future,
Well, no, just the first part for now. Just do you only is the only thing that you're caring about is the current level of sentience when describing your value, whether they have the value to, like, in this context, not be chopped up into pieces.
okay, yeah, like if it's something that in some way is violating my bodily autonomy, like a being living inside me, then yeah, in that
Well,
situation.
I actually don't think that it's violating your bodily autonomy. I think you're the one in this case that
No, it
violated
is.
its bodily
No, it
autonomy.
absolutely no, it absolutely is.
Wait, hold on. Wait. So let me understand this. So let's say you let's say you played with some stem cells, and if you played with some stem cells, you knew, like, something would happen and I would be in a state of dependence on you, and it would instantiate the state of dependence, right? And you engaged in playing with the stem cells, and lo and behold, it reached out its tendrils or whatever and hooked and forced me to be in such a weakened state that I was dependent on just you, and it hooked itself up to us. Who has violated one's bodily autonomy when you perform this action? Did you violate my bodily autonomy, or am I violating your bodily autonomy? I think a much stronger case would be made that you are violating my bodily autonomy, not the other way around.
Okay, sure, I'll concede that.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So you are violating the bodily autonomy of the fetus, not the other way around.
Okay. Okay, I won't use that wording. I'd agree with that. I would say, yeah, I would say it's inhibiting you in some way. It's
Okay.
inconveniencing you in some way, but it's
Yep.
not violating your bodily autonomy. Okay.
Okay. Now the question is, are you only considering, in your valuation in this context, are you only considering the current level of sentience?
Yeah. Yeah. In that
Okay.
context, yeah.
Okay. Now, if that's the case, um, if that's so, you see no difference between, in that context, you would see no difference between a grandpa who is in a coma, but, well, not even a grandpa, a baby who is in a coma, a full-fledged baby who's in a coma but will wake up, and a full-fledged baby who's in a coma but will not wake up. You
Well, the
wouldn't see a
difference
difference
there.
between.
Okay. Well, the difference there is not inside you.
No. Let's say it was. You don't see a difference
Okay.
between a full-fledged baby that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the only way to get rid of it is to kill it, then yeah,
Okay, wait a minute.
I don't
Hold on a
care.
second here. Hold on. One moment. So, in a normal context, just in any normal context, is it also the case that you would just consider the potential for sentience? I mean, sorry, the current level of sentience and not the potential for sentience?
In a normal context,
Yeah, in any other context, aside from being inside the body, in any other
well,
context,
yeah,
would you
I
only
mean,
consider current level of
like if
sentience?
somebody has some sort of really bad
Hmm.
head injury and they're in a coma and their
Hmm.
like level of sentience is lower than if they didn't have the brain injury, but they're going to heal from that and be
Well, they
conscious
did in
again.
both cases. So in both cases, they have the brain injury, and they both have a very low level of sentience, but one individual will recover where the other individual won't. The one individual will have a very high probability of developing future sentience in the future. The other individual won't. Do they have the same value to you?
No, like we're talking about out like just a normal person, right?
Okay. Well,
Yeah, then
well,
the person who's
talking
going to
about
have
two.
future sentience is going to
Yeah.
have more
Yeah.
value. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So, and so do you, in this context where it's inside the body, it is also the case that there's a very high probability that this individual is not just going to remain at this level of sentience. They're going
Yeah.
to also have, yeah. So do you only consider the current level of sentience if it's inside the body, or
Yeah,
do you
I'd
also,
only consider the current level.
okay. Okay.
There's like I do have reasons
Wait,
for
so
that.
hold on. Let me just ask you this question then.
Sure.
Um, so let's say there was this woman, right? And this woman just decided for fun that she would take a being who is in a coma and just shove it in her womb, right? And if she did that in some hypothetical world in such a way that there would be an instantiation of a dependency, and then things would be hooked up, and and it would be hooked up for 9 months. So now, so now, is your valuation the same as if the being did not would not have any future degree of sentience? It's just the same valuation as if there was no potential for future sentience, even if there was.
Okay, and
Hmm.
the coma patient that was put
Hmm.
inside the womb, was
Yeah.
this person normal before?
Oh, no, no, yeah, they were like
They were just
they
always in a coma, and
well,
then
they could be
eventually.
always, yeah, they could be always, sure, we
Yeah, if
can
they were
say that they were
always, yeah, if
always,
they were
yeah.
like always in a coma where they had a
Hmm.
similar level of sentience
Okay.
as a fetus, then yeah,
Okay.
I'd say smush it.
Sure. Now, so okay, so the next question, so you're just valuing the current levels. Okay. Now the question is, in terms of what level, because we don't actually know the level of sentience of the fetus. So that's, I guess, where this would go. So I would just ask you, what level of sentience are you comfortable with, even if it is the case that you force this being in a state of dependency on you, even if it's the case that you violated its bodily autonomy, not the other way around, even if it's the case that um, you knew about this when you did it, what level of sentience are you okay with chopping it up after?
Um. Okay, so I have a very hard time believing
Hmm.
that like a 2, 3, 4 month old fetus
Hmm.
somewhere around there. Very hard time believing that it has like any actual desire to live. Like
Well,
it
desire
can.
for live is not the same thing as sentience.
Well, well, wouldn't you have to have
No,
sentience? Like
wait.
I know it's
You
not.
okay? I can
Well,
explain.
it's linked to like level of sentience.
So a desire for, if you have a desire for sentience, it does entail that you are sentient. But if you do not have a desire for sentience, it does not entail that you are not sentient. You can have a
Well,
higher level
sure. I
of
mean,
sentience
you
without any
could, yeah,
desire.
you could want to kill yourself, sure.
Well, there can be two beings. One being has a higher level of sentience with no desires to do anything, any of these activities or whatnot. And it could have a higher level of sentience than a being that does have desires to do activities. So that's
Okay,
not,
okay, I
yeah.
understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Well, my armpits are really sweaty. Um, I just worked out. I'm not nervous. Yeah. So, all right, I understand what you're saying. Um, it might not. Okay, so it would kind of relate to sentience a little bit, but I'd say desire for sentience is a separate aspect to it. I have a very hard time believing that, and like a fetus early on in the pregnancy, 2, 3, 4 months, would have any desire to be sentient. And I mean, just obviously, its level of sentience, its
So
ability to,
it's not
well,
about sentience. It's not about.
it is partly about sentience. I mean, its ability to like feel experience isn't going to be the same as, you or me. But on top
Mhm.
of that, I really have a hard time believing that
Okay.
a 2, 3, 4 month old fetus is going to have desire for
Mhm.
sentience, hopes and
So
dreams,
if
things like
we,
that.
so
I
if
understand
someone,
that's separate from
yeah.
sentience. I understand that's separate from sentience, so that's also a part of it.
So if someone took Brie, right? If someone took Brie, if a woman
What's
decided to
Brie?
take Brie and, Brie, oh, the, this is the mentally handicapped individual that was commonly cited as, oh, I'm okay. So let's say there is a mentally handicapped individual, right? We can, if you're not familiar with the Brie video, that's fine. So let's say we take this mentally handicapped individual who will tomorrow become non-mentally handicapped naturally. and a woman decides to take her and take this being and shove it in her vagina and shove it up her vagina in her womb, and there's an instantiation where there is a 9-month dependency and everything is hooked up by doing that. It is, you would say that it would be permissible to kill that being after, so to kill the mentally handicapped being
Yeah, I
after
don't
doing
care.
that. Okay, now let's say there is a giant woman, right, who goes to the mentally handicapped school
Sure.
and takes all the mentally handicapped children and shoves it in her womb, shoves every one of them in her womb,
Sure.
all of those beings. Now she just takes a nice little grinder, right? She takes the Roto-Rooter and
I
grinder
like
up. And she's
this.
like,
I like this
I'm gonna
idea.
take the whole special ed. She takes all the
Sure.
special ed, puts one after the other, shoves it up her womb, and then
Yeah.
says, "Get the grinder in me. I'm gonna chop them all up." You're okay with that?
Yeah.
All right.
So look, this, like, again, I have a little bit of an issue with this analogy because, yeah, somebody who's just mentally disabled, like with Down syndrome or something, little different than like a 2, 3, 4-month-old fetus.
Oh wait. No,
like we could assume, like, I mean, in the hypothetical, we could assume that same level of sentience, same level of intelligence, other aspects as well, like willingness to live, are all the same. But I mean, it's just
there are plenty
sure,
of
sure.
special ed people like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Let's just say all these hypothetical special ed people, same level of intelligence, sentience, willingness to live as a 2, 3, 4, or 5-month-old fetus.
Richard, I don't even think it's a crazy hypothetical. I think there are actual real.
No, I'd agree with you. Like, I mean, I've definitely seen some people who, for sure. Yeah, I don't care.
But let's add, and they will tomorrow, or in the future, be non-mentally handicapped. They will be like you and I.
Sure. Yeah, I don't care.
Okay, to all grind them all up.
Yeah, I don't see a moral issue with that.
Okay. And so just also to be clear, so you would consider the potential, so you consider the potential for future sentience as valuable outside of the womb, but not inside of the womb. Is that also correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's like, we can go into it. I mean, there's social aspects to it.
Well, wait, before we get into the social aspects,
sure.
this is the important. Is it just the 3-dimensional space where the individual is? Is that you wouldn't consider the potential for future sentience? Is it just about that? Because the change in the 3-dimensional orientation of the objects of the beings in relation to the object around them, is that what like disqualifies the being's value based on future potential sentience?
Well, kind of. I mean, if they're in a certain 3-dimensional space, they inconvenience me or someone else.
Okay, but now that's not valuing the 3-dimensional space simpliciter. That's valuing the 3-dimensional space not intrinsically, but because it has other effects.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not about, what's different is not that it's in the womb. What's different is because it's in the womb, they inconvenience the individual.
Yeah, in some way. And I mean, we can, like, inconvenience can be anything. I mean, somebody could stand in my doorway and not really bother me. It's just, I just don't want them there.
At what level of okay, so it's not about the being in the womb. So first question right off the bat, let's say there was an individual who wasn't inconvenienced, they just wanted to get the abortion because, hey, heck, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so
I'd consider that inconvenience.
Is it?
No, I'd put that under inconvenience. They just don't, well, obviously, if they just want to test out.
Okay, yeah, if meeting a desire would be a better way.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so it's the ability to desire. Okay, is there any level of sentience at which you would say that this is not permissible? That, in other words, is there any level of currently reached sentience for which you would say, it is not okay to grind this thing up that you forced to be dependent on you, and you violated its autonomy, and the only reason it's in this situation is because that's exactly what you did. Like, we can start with like goldfish, chicken, pig, cow, human. Like, we can go through animals if you like.
Sure. I see where this is going. Yeah, I see. Okay, so
you see the death pen right over there.
Yeah.
The mine is right in front of you, Richard.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I guess like if we're in a situation where, yeah, if we're in a situation where, what's it called? You force dependence off of someone else. Yeah, then I'd say there is a threshold for things like sentience,
Okay.
other things like willingness to live, intelligence, whatever.
Mhm. Okay, so let's say we can do it with animals. Okay, so let's say we can go start like insect, goldfish, chicken, dog, pig. Like where roughly speaking, I don't you don't have to solve the Socrates paradox, but roughly speaking, where would you say, actually, at this current level of sentience, it's not okay when you put a being in this situation and force it to be there that you just chop it up after.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think I'm contradicting myself now. Yeah,
Well, you
I've made a
haven't yet. You
contradiction.
you will in the future, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
haven't.
yeah. No.
Yeah, you're going there.
Yeah, you know what? Right now, I think I'd have to concede to your point.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, I think the only really argument right now that I'd have to rely on is, um, yeah, just whether or not it's overall beneficial for our social structure to be able to like have abortions. Um,
Wow, so we can go into that empirical debate, but more importantly, the principled thing is, even if there was some benefit to the social structure, presumably, presumably if we were to force animals to be in a state of dependence on us, um, even if there was some benefit, like let's say if we took chickens for example, or mentally handy, like they're just chickens, and we forced them to be in a state of dependence on themselves, let's say there would be some benefit, they could eat the meat if we, hack them to pieces, or if, we use their feathers and coats or whatever. I don't, I, do you think that would really like make it for you? Or like, you know what? Yeah, let's club them.
no,
Or
no, I don't think so.
yeah,
Let me
yeah, I don't think
see.
so either.
Um, I'm just looking through this again.
Hmm.
The symmetry breakers.
Hmm.
Okay, you know what? One
Hmm.
issue that I might have with the first symmetry breaker partook in forcing another being to be in a state of dependence on you.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't think I totally agree with that in a lot of circumstances, like with accidental pregnancies. So let's say if I don't know, you were drunk and had sex and you
Hmm.
didn't really have control of your actions, or
Okay.
if you were taking fairly adequate measures to prevent a
Hmm.
pregnancy, like let's say you were taking birth control and you were
Hmm.
doing the protocol properly,
Do you know what the
but
failure rate? Do you know what the
I
failure
know
rate?
it's extremely low. I know it's extremely low.
Well, no, it's high.
Um,
It's extremely high if for average use. Well,
what do you
the
mean
point,
average use?
yeah. Well, use
Well,
that.
assuming you're actually doing the protocol properly, it's
Right,
high.
right, right, right. So there's a difference. There's a study on this where they look at the 10-year risk of pregnancy for birth, someone taking birth control, in quote unquote usual use, typical use, and for use that is perfect. We can actually
Okay,
get
so
that data.
that eliminates human error.
Well, that it. So what my point really is not that it eliminates human error. It's
No,
my
I mean
point.
they're looking at an analysis that removes
Yeah,
human error from the equation. Yeah.
yeah, they do like, okay, if you actually were fully compliant and whatnot,
Yeah.
over this period of time.
Yeah. What's
Now,
the percentage?
the first I'm pulling that up, but the first thing I'll point out is that um, full compliance in birth control pills is not typical. That's why it's
Yeah, I
called
know. I know.
yeah.
I'm
But
aware
the
of
reason
that.
this is but the reason this
I'm
is
aware of
yeah,
that, but I'm saying in
right,
a
right,
situation like I'm providing a hypothetical where it
right.
would be.
No, no, I understand. I understand. I get you.
Yeah,
The
and I
reason,
mean, like even dudes who get vasectomies who actually get
yeah,
it
yeah.
confirmed. This is why I
Hmm.
actually get my vasectomy tested every year just to make sure.
Yeah.
Um, so like
Like,
there are many situations where pregnancies
I
occur
gotcha. No,
where
I
yeah.
gotcha, Richard. The reason the important thing I'm trying to draw your attention to is that if I can get you to concede that the majority of abortions are still unethical and should be illegal, I would consider you still mostly pro-life. So even if you find these cases where say, okay, well, the abortion happened in this case where, I used a method of birth control that not only was like extremely, extremely, extremely low below like, and I used it all and did it perfectly and everything like that. That's not the majority of abortions, Richard. And even so, if I can get you, even if I grant that, even if like I say, okay, fine, but what about all these other cases where that's not the case? If I can get you to concede the majority of abortions are unethical or illegal, you are mostly pro-life, my friend. Now I'll send you the data, but I just want you to appreciate that.
Doesn't really like yeah, I mean you can send me the data. It doesn't really matter just
Mm-hmm.
for the hypothetical I'm creating. So let's see. This is 92 and 100. So wait. So it's anywhere from 46 to 96% effective.
It depends on the methods that you're using. So with these, so some methods are even more. These are the popular methods, but some methods have higher lower failure rates. Sorry. So in the what you'll see is in the red line you'll see typical use, and in the dotted line you'll see perfect use.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see. Yeah, and you have lines like which says you say less than 25 is below the first before the first horizontal line. The second horizontal line is the 50% chance of being pregnant. So you'll see spermicides. Spermicides are over 10 years. If you use spermicides over 10 years, it's not that effective. Fertility awareness base, not effective. Sponges, not that effective. Withdrawal, definitely not effective. Condom use, interesting. So female condoms over 10 years are also pretty, even with perfect use, will reach around 50%, which between 25 and 50% as a failure rate. Male condoms will just get close to the 25% failure rate if used perfectly. If typical use is occurring, it goes above 50%. Diaphragms go above 50% in typical use. In perfect use, they get close to 50% as a failure rate over 10 years. Sponges, both typical use and perfect use, go over 50% as a failure rate. You'll notice that the pill is much more effective if you use perfectly. If it's typical use, it's a 61% failure rate over 10 years. And then the same thing with, well, similar with the Depo-Provera. So you'll notice, so the perfect use in the pill is much better, although still has a reasonable error rate. I would say, I don't have the exact numbers for the perfect use. That looks around, I don't know, maybe 5%, maybe a little, maybe 4. I don't know. I can do a pixel calculation or whatnot, or I can dig deeper into data. But in any case, the point being here is that at the very least, even if you want to say that, you know, because remember, number 4, the symmetry breaker is number 4, is what you're getting at here, is the knowledge of the current probability of forcing another to be dependent on you,
Sure.
what that probability is. So if
Well, I
the
mean,
yeah,
okay, if we're gonna use knowledge, I mean, you can take
yeah,
stupid teenage kids who don't know fuck all about
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I
And
could say
dude,
knowledge. Yeah,
I don't know about like in the US or something, but I mean, here, like women just think, oh, I'm on the pill, I can't get pregnant. Like it's
yeah,
impossible.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
would you say that if an individual is, well, first off, would you say if an individual is aware of this, that it would be immoral and should be under illegal in principle, at least in principle,
I
to
would say it changes the moral landscape, but yeah, I don't know if I'd actually go that far. Um, honestly, I just really lack reverence for human life, and anything that we do that just prevents more children from being born, I'm kind of in favor of.
well, we can slaughter. Well, I mean, well, we don't have to slaughter them. If that's the case, we don't have to slaughter them while they're in the womb. We can just slaughter babies. If it was legal to do that, just newborn babies, to just put them in the grinder like we do with the male chicks.
I'd have to concede that if you had adequate knowledge
Hmm.
beforehand, before having consensual sex of the
Hmm.
potential risks involved, yeah, I think I'd have to concede at this point that, yeah, if you do end up getting pregnant, you have a responsibility to the child.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I think that's good enough for me. We can maybe go into the further details at another time. But and you would also agree that if you don't use birth control, definitely then at that point, um, then if
Well,
you
yeah, I
voluntarily.
mean, like, again, if we assume that
Mhm.
you understand the risks involved, like, I
Yeah.
don't know, you could find like a fucking idiot 15-year-old. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
if you pull out, it,
Yeah.
people who've never had sex education.
Yeah. Hmm.
I still think in those circumstances of like accidental pregnancies where
Hmm.
people don't have adequate
Hmm.
knowledge, and I think a lot of fucking people don't.
Hmm.
Like, there's so many women who think birth control pills are perfect and like they can't get
Hmm.
pregnant. I don't know how prevalent that belief is in other
Hmm.
places, but I know around here that's certainly the case.
Hmm.
So, still, just like in a legal context,
Hmm.
because there's just no way to like police this and investigate this adequately. No, I think people should still be able to have access to abortions, just to allow people who, okay, either didn't have adequate prior knowledge of the risks
Hmm.
involved, or people who are in legitimate instances of like rape, just so that they can
Hmm.
get easy, safe access to abortion.
So let me ask you this. Let's say let's say someone was playing with stem cells, right? And they didn't know that what would result from the stem cells um, is a whole family of, let's just scale it up on your view. Let's say there's 100,000 chickens that are just hooked up to you and will cause the same amount of thing. It's just a 9 month hooking up, and it's not going to harm you in any abnormal way that a pregnancy would, other than a pregnancy out of that range. Um, at that point, is it okay? And you didn't know it, but you realize after the fact that, okay, actually, I was the one, my actions that I partook in caused other beings to be in dependent state. The beings are sentient. The dependency is already instantiated. I unknowingly, granted unknowingly, but did violate their autonomy and put them in the situation. Do you think it would be okay to now grind up all of these chickens or chop them up?
Yeah, like, I mean, again, assuming that that was the only sort of position you were in to separate them from yourself, yeah,
Which
I'd
is the
have to say
case
yeah.
in a whole bunch of yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, which is
yeah.
yeah.
That I'd
Okay.
have to say yeah.
Okay. And it would be
Like
the
the
same thing. Yeah.
species, like the species to me doesn't matter. It could be like fucking
Hmm.
alien face
Yeah.
hugger or whatever the fuck.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess so in terms of like the question of on your view, so on your view, it would be an empirical discussion of whether you're mostly pro-life or not. You're certainly a lot more pro-life than you are in the start of this debate,
Yeah, I
because
mean, I have to concede these points just because you've proven some of these lead to contradictions. Yeah.
yeah. So at least in the case where you are aware that there is of the current probability of forcing another to be dependent on you, and those other things hold, you would say that it would be immoral to have an abortion in those cases.
Yeah, yeah, like assuming you
Okay.
have adequate knowledge and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now, so I guess I'm not sure where you fall into the spectrum in terms of pro-choice or pro-life. You seem so you may be mostly pro-life, you may not be, depending on the empirical data on the knowledge of individuals with respect to pregnancy and how many of them, percentage-wise, are given an abortion. So I'm actually agnostic of whether you're mostly pro-life or mostly pro-choice at this point in time. I'd have to go do a deep dive in the data. Um,
I
yeah.
mean,
Mhm.
it really wouldn't matter to me
Yeah.
personally. Like whether I can adequately justify it or not,
Hmm.
I'd
Hmm.
still say everybody should just be able to get an abortion, just because of my own personal views and feelings on like the human race and how I don't like children and I want to reduce the human population, things like that.
Oh, so you would just
Um,
admit that so you would just hold the view that would be wait, hold on. I'm
I
trying to understand.
like just because of my own personal issues with human beings, how I don't like children to begin with. I want to massively reduce the human population. I'd prefer
Mhm.
there to be only millions of people as opposed to billions. um, I just prefer to have fewer people come into existence,
Well,
especially
well,
in
well,
especially in these situations where they're just unwanted.
but Richard, I'm not asking about your. I mean, you can have a
I
preference.
know,
Like,
I know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying I'd still be in
yeah,
favor of it just because of my preference, but I'm saying I will concede that
yeah.
yeah, there are certain situations where abortions would be immoral. Yeah.
Okay. So you would say it's immoral, but hold on. So do you? So what is your? I'm trying to understand. Is would you say that they should be able to get an abortion even though it's immoral, or even though
Yeah, I
in
mean,
that case?
if we're gonna talk about
But that's
like,
not a preference. Like that's just like I want to know what your view is. Like, do you have the
well,
view
right.
that these? Yeah.
I mean, just because there's so
Well, I
many
guess it could be a
unwanted.
preference.
Well, just because there's so many unwanted pregnancies, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of people who end up getting pregnant without like things like prior knowledge. There are instances of rape. I just think people should have safe access to abortion, and the government shouldn't get involved and basically be the moral police in these sorts of
Well,
situations.
wait. Now
When
you're going back to the cases where you didn't think there was a contradiction. I'm just talking about the cases where you do agree there's a contradiction.
right,
So, yeah,
I'd
okay. So,
still be in favor of letting those people get an abortion. Yeah,
okay, in principle, in
yeah, in
principle.
principle.
Okay. So you would just hold a contradictory. You would
Oh,
affirm.
okay, wait. What do you mean by principle? You're just mean like morally
So,
speaking?
so in other words, I'm saying like let's say we could have a pragmatic way to separate these cases out. Like if we could have a way of saying of ensuring that legally and in a way that results pragmatically in such a way that we prevent the individuals who had the knowledge of the probabilities of being pregnant engaged in it anyway, took that risk and then got pregnant. Say we had that ability to stop them from getting an abortion. On your view, should we stop them from getting an abortion, or should we allow them to get an abortion?
Um, yeah, on principle, then yeah, I'd have to say we should.
We should
We should
stop them.
stop
Okay.
them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I'd still prefer them to get an abortion though.
All right. So it's a perfect.
Honestly,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
like, but when you here's what yeah. So, but when you say for example, I don't have like a preference to have, you know, gay sex, but that's very different from my
I
principled stance on yeah.
yeah
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah
Okay. So cool. I think
like
we've actually made a lot of progress in this
yeah.
discussion. So yeah.
Definitely the fucking hardest abortion debate I've ever had. I'm
Hey,
actually kind of surprised.
you
I
changed your
knew.
view, Richard.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
changed
yeah.
your view on a whole bunch of abortions that now you think should be illegal.
Yeah, well, yeah, if I can't come up with an argument, I'm gonna
Yeah.
concede. I'm not a
No,
fucking retard.
I appreciate the intellectual
But
honesty.
yeah, I'll think about some of the
Hmm.
things you said. I'll see if I can come up with any counter arguments. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely the hardest abortion debate I've had. I knew going into this it would be difficult, but I'm actually
Hmm.
surprised. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
cool.